The room was silent, but not the peaceful kind. It was the silence of hunger, of unpaid bills, of dreams slowly suffocating in the dark. The wallpaper peeled from the damp walls. A single bulb flickered weakly, and the plates on the floor had nothing but faint stains of yesterday's meal. Lily lay on a thin mattress, her eyes fixed on the cracked ceiling above, wondering if the universe had already chosen her fate, a life of surviving, not living. Her chest ached with the weight of unanswered prayers. She wanted more, but every door had slammed shut. And just as her thoughts slipped deeper into despair, a voice broke the silence. Soft, steady, unshaken, her boyfriend leaned closer, whispering words she didn't believe she deserved. One day you'll rise from this room, and the world will know your name. In that fragile moment, hope flickered, small, but alive. Lily's story didn't begin with wealth or comfort. It began in a small town where cracked pavements told the story of generations that never escaped. She walked those streets carrying second-hand books pressed tightly against her chest, her only armor, against the whispers that said she'd never make it out. Her ambition was fierce, a fire that refused to die, but fire alone doesn't pay bills. Each day, envelopes stacked on the kitchen table, rent notices, overdue payments, quiet reminders that dreams don't feed hungry stomachs. She applied for jobs, poured her heart into applications, only to face rejection after rejection. Each letter felt like a door slamming, echoing the same cruel message. Not good enough. Yet even in those moments she held on. Because somewhere deep inside, beneath all the scars of poverty, she believed her story wasn't meant to end in silence. In a world quick to laugh at her dreams, one person refused to join the chorus. He wasn't wealthy, didn't wear fine suits, and had no connections to open golden doors. But he had something far rarer, faith in Lily when she had none left in herself. While neighbors smirked at her ambitions and relatives called her unrealistic, he stood steady. Each night, when exhaustion bent her spirit and tears blurred the words on her books, he leaned close and whispered the same promise. Your name will shine beyond these streets. Those weren't just words. They were lifelines, pulling her back each time despair tried to drown her. In his eyes, she wasn't the broke girl from a forgotten town. She was already more, already destined for something bigger. And though she couldn't see it yet, his belief kept her heartbeat aligned with hope. Lily's dream wasn't extravagant. It was survival wrapped in ambition. She wanted to build something of her own, a business that could break the chains poverty had locked around her family for generations. But instead of support, she was met with laughter. Friends chuckled at the idea, mocking her for chasing what they called a fantasy. Relatives, tired of her persistence, dismissed her with sharp words. Get a normal job. Stop wasting time. Even strangers, overhearing her ideas, raised eyebrows and smirked, as if her hunger for more was a comedy to them. Each laugh, each cutting remark dug deeper than she admitted. She carried those wounds silently, smiling in public but breaking in private. And yet, when the weight became unbearable, her boyfriend's voice rose above the noise. His words burned into her. One day they'll regret laughing. In that moment, mockery transformed into fuel. Every insult became another reason to fight harder. There comes a night when even the fiercest dreamers break, and for Lily, that night arrived quietly. Her pockets were empty. Investors had turned their backs, and every proposal she sent returned like a cruel echo of rejection. She lay on her thin mattress, the room heavy with silence, tears soaking through the pillow. For the first time, she whispered to herself what she feared most. Maybe they were right. Maybe this dream isn't mine to hold. But then, through the storm of her sobs, a hand reached for hers, steady, warm, unshaken. Her boyfriend's voice cut through the darkness. If the world closes every door, we'll build our own house. Those words didn't just comfort her. They sparked something deeper. In that fragile silence, despair hardened into defiance. Lily rose, not because she was strong, but because someone refused to let her fall. The turning point didn't come with a grand opportunity. It arrived in the form of an insult overheard in a corner cafe. Lily sat hunched over a chipped wooden table, sipping the cheapest coffee she could afford, when two businessmen at the next table began laughing. Their voices were sharp, arrogant, echoing in the small space. These little online shops, they don't last a year, one sneered. The other chuckled. People like that always give up. Too small to matter. Something inside Lily cracked open. She wasn't angry at them, She was angry at herself for almost becoming what they mocked. Her chest tightened, and for the first time in weeks her tears weren't of defeat but of determination. That night she told her boyfriend, and instead of doubting, his eyes lit up. Together, they sketched ideas on scraps of paper, dreaming bigger than their hunger. With borrowed Wi-Fi from a neighbor's weak signal and an old laptop that crashed twice an hour, she built her first online store. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And this time, she wasn't building it to survive. She was building it to prove them all wrong. The days no longer had beginnings or ends. They were just one long stretch of work. Nights blurred into mornings as Lily typed with shaky fingers on a flickering laptop. The screen froze more than it functioned, but she refused to stop. Every glitch, every error felt like the world testing her resolve. Through it all, her boyfriend was there. He stayed awake beside her, eyes heavy with fatigue but never complaining. When her hands trembled from exhaustion, he slid a warm cup of tea onto the desk. When her shoulders sagged in despair, he whispered, "You're not alone. Keep going." And then one morning, as sunlight crept through the curtains, a notification blinked on the screen. Their first sale. Just a single order, small, barely enough to buy a meal. But to them it was everything. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she turned to him. They laughed, they cried, they held each other tightly. It wasn't money, it was proof. Proof that somewhere out there, a stranger had believed enough to buy. In that fragile moment, possibility was no longer a dream. It was real and it was alive. The first sale opened a door and soon others followed. The orders were small, sometimes no more than a few dollars, but each one carried the weight of a promise. For Lily, it was enough to believe. For her boyfriend, it was enough to fight even harder alongside her. Every penny mattered. While others her age spent evenings out with friends, Lily skipped meals so she could reinvest every cent back into her fragile little store. Her stomach growled, but she silenced it with determination. Meanwhile, her boyfriend picked up side jobs, fixing bikes, delivering packages, anything that kept the lights on just one more week. They ate scraps, shared broken furniture, and laughed through exhaustion. The world saw two broke dreamers, but they felt something different. Every sacrifice stitched them closer to the future they envisioned. Hunger wasn't just hunger. It was proof that they were building something worth starving for. In those nights of struggle, their love transformed. It wasn't about flowers or dates. It was about holding each other through storms. The sacrifices weren't a burden. They became a language, one only they understood. The language of two hearts building a dream together. For weeks, the struggle felt endless. Tiny orders, long nights, empty stomachs. But then, almost like fate stepping in, something shifted. A customer shared Lily's product in a small online community, a place where voices carried further than she imagined. By morning, the store that once sat in silence was flooded with orders. Notifications lit up the cracked laptop screen like fireworks in the dark. Lily's tired eyes widened, filling with a glow she hadn't worn in months. Her laughter, once buried under exhaustion, spilled out freely as she clutched her boyfriend's arm in disbelief. The hunger, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, they all suddenly felt worth it. He watched her, smiling quietly, letting her joy wash over him. And then, leaning close, he whispered, steady as ever, "This is just the beginning." Those words weren't just comfort. They were prophecy. For the first time, Lily truly believed she was stepping into the light. Success had finally begun to whisper Lily's name. Orders flowed in. Her small store buzzed with life, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to breathe. She trusted more, dreamed bigger, and leaned on a supplier she believed would grow with her. But then, the knife slipped in where she least expected. Almost overnight, her designs appeared online, replicated, cheaper, stolen. The very hands she relied on had betrayed her. The flood of orders slowed to a trickle, then to silence. The screen that once lit up like fireworks now glowed with emptiness. Lily's chest caved as she watched months of sacrifice collapse in days. Tears smeared across her keyboard. The mocking voices returned. "See? Too small to survive." But beside her he didn't bend. His voice was steady, his eyes fierce. "They can copy your products, Lily, but they'll never copy your fire." In that moment, betrayal became fuel. Her spirit, though bruised, refused to die. The betrayal left scars deeper than Lily expected. Days turned into weeks of decline. Her bank account, once flickering with hope, drained to nothing. Creditors began circling like vultures, their calls filling the air with threats and deadlines. The glow in her eyes dimmed, replaced by shadows of exhaustion and doubt. Each attempt to rebuild seemed to crumble faster than the last. The laughter of her critics returned to haunt her, echoing in her head until it became unbearable. And one night, in the suffocating silence of their small room, she broke. Her voice cracked as she screamed through tears. "Maybe they were right, I'm nothing." The words hung heavy, filling the air with despair. For a moment, even the walls seemed to close in. Then came his answer, not loud, not desperate, but steady and unshakable. He took her trembling hands and whispered, "You're everything, Lily. Get back up. I'll fight with you." That voice, the same one that had carried her from hunger to hope, pulled her back once more. She wasn't alone in the ruins. Together they still had fire, and fire was enough to begin again. Lily's breaking point became her turning point. The night she collapsed in tears, something inside her shifted. Rage mixed with love, rage at the betrayal, love for the man who refused to let her give up. That fire reignited her will stronger than ever before. She would not just rebuild, she would rise. This time she wasn't naive. She studied the game, learning from every wound and misstep. Instead of relying on shaky suppliers, she forged direct partnerships, securing allies who believed in her vision. She rebranded boldly, turning scars into symbols of resilience. With each new idea, she pushed boundaries, innovating in ways that made imitation impossible. The world began to notice. Orders didn't just return, they multiplied, streaming in from places she had only once dreamed of reaching. Word spread, and soon investors were knocking at her door, eager to be part of what she was building. Her business was no longer a fragile dream. It was a growing empire, forged from ashes and fire. And as she stood at the center of it all, Lily realized this wasn't luck. This was survival, transformation, and proof that the storm hadn't destroyed her. It had made her unstoppable. What began in a dimly lit room with cracked walls had grown into something unimaginable. Lily's name was no longer whispered in small online groups. It blazed across continents. From bustling cities to quiet towns, her brand had become a household name. Skyscraper offices bore her company's logo, and numbers in her bank account now stretched into millions. Yet despite the glittering success, she carried the shadows of hunger and despair in her heart, reminders of the nights when even a cup of tea felt like a luxury. When she stepped onto the stage at her first global conference, the lights blinded her for a moment, but not enough to hide what mattered most. There he was, sitting in the front row, the same man who once stayed awake through endless nights, making sure she didn't collapse. Their eyes met, and time seemed to fold back to the nights of whispered encouragement and trembling hands over a laptop. Tears welled up, not from the wealth or applause, but from the journey they had survived together. To the world, she was a millionaire visionary. To him, she was still Lily, the girl who refused to break. And in that moment, they both knew this was their victory. Lily stood before the roaring crowd, lights blazing, cameras flashing, but her eyes searched only for him. The man who once whispered hope in a broken room now sat in the front row, tears glistening. In that moment, she understood. The story wasn't about the skyscrapers or the riches. It was about belief. Her journey had been carved not by money or luck, but by a quiet voice that refused to let her quit when the world mocked. His simple words, "You'll shine beyond these streets," became the fuel that carried her through hunger, betrayal, and collapse. They were more powerful than investors, louder than critics, stronger than fear, and that's the truth. Success isn't just built on ambition, it's built on love, on belief, on someone daring to see greatness in you when you cannot. So let Lily's story remind you. Be that voice for someone. Lift them when the world drags them down. And if this story sparked a fire inside you, don't let it fade. Subscribe now, your own journey is waiting.